Hey viewers, this is going to be a long one, so get ready. Fallout 4's raiders are basically a one-dimensional faction of unreasonably unified psychopaths that dress like BDSM fetishists. The game would have been greatly improved if it had multiple raider gangs with unique identities and alliances, and if it let you join one of them as an alternative to the Minutemen. Sadly, the closest we got to this idea is the Forged, who appear at one single location, and of course you're not allowed to become a member. What a disappointment. Well, I've got 13 mods listed on screen. Maybe some of them will help add more variety to this unfortunate faction. I deliberately decided not to showcase some really old mods that require Armorsmith Extended or Armor and Weapon Keywords Community Resource, and I'm sure there's some other mods I missed, but I covered as much ground as I possibly could with only a week to work with, so let me give my recommendations. First and easiest to recommend is Capital Wasteland Raider Pack. It adds new faces and outfits to raiders, and the outfits are entirely lore-friendly, perfectly balanced, and have no dismemberment problems. There are some potential issues with this mod, but I'll go over those in my full breakdown. After that, I can safely recommend Rat Garbs, although a lot of people will contend its art style clashes with the vanilla game too much. Its apparel isn't as balanced as Capital Wasteland Raider Pack, and a few outfits have gore cap problems, but it's a pretty good mod all things considered. I can also recommend People Live In Unmarked Raider Camps. It's a simple little mod that adds more details to the small raider encampments already present in the game. It doesn't break precombines, so the only reason not to use it would be if you're using an obscure landscape overhaul and you're worried about a few floating objects. Lastly, I'll recommend a big one. Forest Gimp's Raider Overhaul ONE. It's a huge collection of outfits, weapons, and ingestibles all packed into a very compatible mod. It has a handful of problems, but I'll save those for its section in the analysis portion of the video, which is going to start right now because I'm done recommending mods. Let's get right to it. First up, we've got the Deadly Commonwealth expansion. On Bethesda.net, this mod is split up into individual factions, but the Nexus version is all in one, so this mod covers a lot more than just raiders. There's also many new ridiculous variants of ghouls, gunners, super muttnats, and children of Adam, and holy shit are they tough cookies. But I'll stick to examining the raider portion of this mod. Its main selling point is all the new raider variants. There are little raider midgets that will come swinging at you with melee weapons, raider juggernauts wielding super sledges, raider boomers that explode a few seconds after death. There's raider hussies, raider beastmasters with tamed death claws, raider goliaths that sound like super mutants, and they all start spawning right out of the gate. There's no sense of early game fairness with this mod. If you thought the Corvega factory was supposed to be a low-level area, think again, because it's packed to the brim with tough raiders that will kick your shit in now, and you'll barely be able to damage them because they have so much health. Raider snipers can be exceptionally accurate with their rifles, and sometimes raiders will carry gamma guns, which is very annoying, especially if you're in survival mode. The extra gameplay variety can be cool, but Deadly Commonwealth expansion doesn't add any weapons or outfits. Instead, it repurposes vanilla items. It would have been nice if raider boomers wore a vest full of dynamite to visually indicate their dangerous status, but they don't because there's no new models. The mod also has a slight incompatibility with Raider Overhaul because they edit the same leveled lists, and I know which mod I'd rather use. There's an optimization patch available which replaces its ESP with an ESL flagged ESP. It also fixes some accidentally removed Creation Club paint slots for the vanilla combat helmet. Besides that, it's essentially the same. Dropping this mod into the vanilla game is certain to create a nightmarishly difficult experience. If you're running Scourge and True Damage to normalize the health of all enemies, I can imagine this mod being somewhat fun, but even considering that, there's better options available. Second, we've got Raider Gangs Extended. I was excited to try out this mod because it sounds exactly like what I wanted in my intro. Multiple Raider gangs with unique identities. Sign me up. Unfortunately, it doesn't really shake out that way. First off, this mod doesn't add any new models or textures. The new Raider gangs only wear outfits from the vanilla game, which means there's not much variety between the gangs. There's also almost no lore created for these factions. There's a few notes, but that's it. So the biggest difference between the Hibernians, Minutemen Deserters, the Hyde Park Gang, and CPG Remnants is their name. This mod doesn't edit leveled lists. Instead, the new Raider gangs are directly placed into the Commonwealth world space. Generic raiders have not been disabled, strangely, so that means you'll see generic raiders fighting alongside the new gangs. It would be cool if the different raider groups fought each other and maybe you could take advantage of the infighting, but as far as the game is concerned, all raiders are still part of the same internal raider faction, so they won't be hostile to each other. That's a big missed opportunity. This mod can make life very difficult in the early game. I have no idea why level 10 and 15 Hellraiser looters were placed in Concord, one of the first places the player is likely to go to. This mod turns the area into a death trap for level 1 characters. Taking the rest of the map into consideration, it's not as bad as the Deadly Commonwealth expansion, however. A few raider bosses have been added to various locations, but they're just regular raiders with bigger health bars, nothing to write home about. This is kind of a disappointing mod, there's not much else to say about it. There is an edited version of the mod by Forest Gimp, but surprisingly the edited version is actually worse. It requires the Alton Assault Helmet and Metro Gas Mask mods to work, and integrates that new headgear into leveled lists, which is kind of nice. But it also adds infinite level scaling to all the NPCs in Raider Gangs Extended. They will always be 1.25 times your level now, even if you're level 200. That means you could forget about ever using the Intimidation perk on these new raiders, and eventually they'll start getting more and more difficult to kill as you run out of ways to increase your damage output. Long story short, forget about both versions of this mod. They're good in concept, but not good enough in execution. Third, we have Raiders, Tribal Forged. This mod adds about a dozen tribal outfits and gives them to the Forged. These are some high quality outfits, but I don't think they fit the style of the vanilla game. Perhaps if you're using Desperados or some other desert landscape mod, they'll be a better match. In that case, you can use this mod with Desert Punks, which I reviewed last July. Anyways, the actual stats of the Forged haven't changed from vanilla, but they now have extra cosmetic variants like Forged Firestarters and Forged Champions. Every variant of the Forged has their own armor, which is not the case in vanilla. As for the armors themselves, they have no upgrades, no ability to take ballistic weave, and cannot be worn with modular armor pieces. They also have very meager stats. Even the Chosen Helm, made from a power armor helmet, is only as good as a vanilla army helmet. By the time you reach Saugus Ironworks, you'll certainly be wearing better armor than this, but that's okay. It's better for armor to be underpowered than overpowered. Dismemberment is a mixed bag. Some headgear doesn't disappear upon decapitation, and some outfits disable limb dismemberment or have missing gore caps. That's typical for apparel mods. This mod conflicts a little with Raider Overhaul 1, so load it after Raider Overhaul 1 if you're going to use them both together, and everything should be fine. Overall, this is a pretty decent mod that will fit into some load orders. Fourth, we've got Tumbajamba's Raider Power Armor. Interestingly, this armor is not added to leveled lists, instead it can be found on 3 bosses placed around the Commonwealth. 2 of them at Revere Beach Station and Roadside Pines Motel are using Cagebreaker Power Armor, and a third named Assbreaker at Leighton Towers is using Assbreaker Armor. The Assbreaker armor has slightly better stats than the Cagebreaker armor, so you might as well use it instead. In terms of balance, these suits seem like they're better than Raider Power Armor, but not as good as fully upgraded T51 or T60 Power Armor. You can decide for yourself whether you think these suits are lore-friendly or not. I think they look cool as hell, so I don't care. The textures might be a bit murky up close, but it's nothing to complain about. Also, this mod adds a unique flamethrower with cryo-later animations called Ass Burner. It's a lot lighter than a flamer and does slightly more damage, but can't be modified. If you're the rare type that's interested in using power armor at all, here's a badass looking, balanced, and well-integrated set for you. This is an excellent mod. Fifth, and one of my recommended mods, is Forest Gimp's Raider Overhaul 1. This is an updated version of the Raider Overhaul mod that hasn't been updated since 2016 and requires AWKCR. I'm not going to bother reviewing the original version. This updated version requires leveled item framework. You need to make sure you install LIF first, or the full mod won't let you install Raider Overhaul 1. You're also going to need the unofficial Fallout 4 patch. Raider Overhaul 1 is a weapon pack, outfit pack, ingestible pack, and a complete rebalance of Raider NPCs all in one, and it only messes up doing one of those things. The mod adds 13 weapons. They use vanilla animations, but they're very well balanced and have an adequate number of modifications. If these weapons were a standalone mod to themselves, I'd rate them as pretty decent. There's several dozen apparel items worn by raiders, and surprisingly I couldn't find any that broke dismemberment, although I didn't have time to test them all. Most outfits can take ballistic weave, and they have good stats, so the player will find them very useful. Some might even be a bit overpowered. It's interesting that many armors have poison and fire resistance when poison isn't much of a factor in Fallout 4's combat, and fire damage doesn't exist at all. All weapons and armor have been injected into leveled lists via scripts, so there's no conflicts with other mods when it comes to that. Heights for raiders have been randomized. They can now be 5% shorter or taller. That's a great little change, and you'll appreciate it once you notice it. Raiders also have a significantly greater number of faces they can spawn with, which is great to see. There's well over a dozen new ingestibles with useful properties. Some can be crafted at a chemistry workbench or cooking station, others will have to be looted from corpses. The ingestibles are added to leveled lists through direct edits, which could pose compatibility problems with other mods that add new chems or food. My biggest problem with this mod is the same problem I had with Raider Gang's extended edit. Raiders level indefinitely with the player. Thankfully, this mod's raiders stay the same level as you. If you're level 50, they'll be level 50, so the intimidation perk still works. But there's still the same problem of them getting harder and harder to kill as your methods of increasing damage slowly dry up. If you're using Scourge or unleveled Commonwealth or a level cap mod, this won't be as much of a problem. Regardless of its little issues, Raider Overhaul 1 delivers more than enough variety to satisfy me, and it will fit snugly into most load orders out there. If Raider Overhaul 1 wasn't enough for you, you can add on to it with Look at Me Raider Edition, but I wouldn't recommend doing so. This mod has two dependencies, Clothing of the Commonwealth and Raider Accessories. Clothing of the Commonwealth requires AWKCR, but there's a replacement ESP to remove that requirement, thank fuck. This mod adds dozens of outfits, but many of them have broken or disabled dismemberment. Gore caps will often be missing, and geometry might not disappear when it should. It's a big turnoff to me, especially since Raider Overhaul is mostly bereft of these issues. A positive change this mod makes is rebalancing the armors from Raider Overhaul 1, removing the poison and fire resistance, and generally reducing damage resistance all around. Some armors can no longer take ballistic weave too. This would be a good change, but this mod adds in its own overpowered armors to compensate, and you can acquire many of them very early on, like metal strap armor. Many armors can be crafted at the chemistry lab if you have the armorer perk too. In the end, I don't think this is any more balanced than Raider Overhaul 1. One very strange thing I noticed is some enemy headgear greatly reduces your chance to hit in VATS. I have a good 80% chance to hit when this enemy isn't wearing a Blastmaster mask, but when I cheated onto her, my chance goes down to 15%. This makes the Forged very tough enemies to fight since they nearly all have masks that fuck up your VATS accuracy. Enemies will still level up with the player indefinitely, so there's no change from Raider Overhaul 1 in that regard. My advice would be to stick with Raider Overhaul 1. This mod has too many little quirks and doesn't add enough to be worth using in my opinion. Next we've got Rat Garbs. This mod adds 20 armor sets, 20 pieces of headgear, and 20 backpacks to the game. They can be added to raiders or settlers through scripted leveled list injection, but it's a very unique form of injection I've never seen before that doesn't use a startup quest. The injection is done very conservatively, only a tiny fraction of raiders will spawn with any gear from this mod. At first you might think it's not even working. Loading additional armor mods will reduce the chances even further, which kind of sucks. If you can't find the outfits out in the world, at least it's possible to craft them all at a chemistry workbench. Inside the department store at General Atomics Galleria, you can find a lingerie magazine that lets you craft additional paint jobs for some outfits as well. I'm a big fan of these clothes. I think they look incredible and fit perfectly into Fallout 4's aesthetic. Some might call a few of the backpacks too silly, like the beer keg or minibar backpacks. Hell, there's even a bounty hunter backpack, which is actually a jetpack. It makes you do an A pose thanks to missing animations. A little bit of goofiness doesn't bother me, though. Dismemberment is in good shape. Helmets and hats always disappear upon decapitation, and gore caps are there on the majority of outfits. A few outfits don't support dismemberment or have missing gore caps, but it's better than most outfit mods. Most armor and headgear have good stats, they support ballistic weave, and they have basic upgrades available at the armor workbench. They all support modular armor pieces too, so you can use Rat Garbs well into the late game. The backpacks in particular will be very useful for just about any character because they add 20 or 50 pounds of carry weight. I can't find much bad to say about this mod. It's a great way to add more variety to NPCs. Mix it with my other recommended mods and you'll occasionally spot a unique piece of gear on your raiders. 8th, we have the mod Raider Children and Other Horrors of the Commonwealth. I can't show much footage of this one because YouTube doesn't like the whole dead children thing. Basically, this mod adds Raider Children to the Raider leveled lists. As you level up, higher level Raider Children will spawn, just like the regular Raider variants in the base game. Many new world-building details have been added to reflect the harsh realities of life for children in the Commonwealth. There's plenty of child corpses strewn about, and you're guaranteed to make more of them because this mod comes with a patch to make children killable, and Raider children aren't likely to surrender. I guess you could use the intimidation perk to stop them from fighting you, but that's a crapshoot, and it doesn't last forever. Once children are pacified, they don't have any special dialogue to send them to a safe place, which is a shame. Anyways, this mod adds a new dungeon, the Medford Orphanage, with a really gruesome story about experiments being performed on children to try to stop ghouls from turning feral. Nasty stuff. In some raider encampments you can find child prisoners and rescue them, and they'll head towards the orphanage, but they usually end up dying on the way there unless you escort them. If you want to be forced to shoot brainwashed children, I guess this is the mod for you. Just don't play it while you're streaming. Yeah, I don't want to discuss this mod anymore because every second I dwell on it increases my chance of getting this video age restricted. Ninth, we have Varied Raiders, and I'll say right off the bat that the additional faces this mod adds are already added by Raider Overhaul 1, so you don't need this mod if you're using Raider Overhaul 1. And from what I've read, this mod doesn't contain face gen data for the new faces, so the game has to generate it on the fly, which causes micro-stutters apparently. I didn't notice any micro-stutter when running around with this mod, but that might be thanks to my expensive new CPU. It might also be because I'm not running any high-res skin texture mods. There's a newer mod called Diverse Raiders that has the exact same problem right now, so unless you have a great PC, I wouldn't use either of these mods, even though the extra face variety is sorely needed. 10th, we have another one of my recommended mods, Capital Wasteland Raider Pack. It adds 10 Raider armors that you'll remember from Fallout 3, as well as its DLC, The Pit. It also adds some extra faces and hairstyles. Everything is injected via script, so there's no need to worry about conflicts. Most of these armors have bad stats, they don't have any upgrades, they don't support modular armor pieces, and none of them support ballistic weave, so beyond the very early game, you won't get much use out of these apparel pieces. Only the Iconoclast armor has half-decent stats, and it lets you wear modular armor pieces on top, so you might be able to use it for a little while until you find something better. The only possible issue this mod might have is the same issue the mod I just looked at had. Because it adds new faces to the game, some people have reported micro-stuttering that goes away when they uninstall the mod. Again, I can't replicate this issue, there's no stuttering on my end. As far as I'm concerned, these outfits are perfectly balanced, they're lore-friendly, and they fully support dismemberment. So, unless the potential performance issues scare you off, grabbing this mod is a complete no-brainer. 11th, we've got a very simple mod that I recommended called People Live in Unmarked Raider Camps. There's 2 packs of Raider Camps you can download, both are ESL flagged, and they do not break pre-combines. If you're using Pre-Visibene's Repair Pack, you'll need to load it after these mods, however. I would also check to make sure your landscape overhaul is on the compatibility list before downloading. If these caveats don't affect you, you'll be doing yourself a service by downloading this excellent mod. You can see a subtle but appreciable difference when viewing locations side by side with their vanilla counterparts. There's significantly more clutter and detail, so it actually looks like people are living in these raider camps. Second to last, we've got Leveled Raiders. All this boring mod does is make a few types of raiders, and not even all of them, level with the player, but only up to a certain point. You see, in vanilla Fallout 4, the stats of raiders are not leveled at all. Raiders without affixes are always level 1, Raider Scum are always level 4, Raider Survivalists are always level 30, and so on. The game gradually introduces higher level raider variants as you level up, but these variants always have the same stats, which isn't a problem as far as I'm concerned. But if you think it's a problem, this mod will change it. A little. With the mod loaded, when you're level 2, regular raiders will be level 2. If you're level 200, those raiders will only be level 10 because that's the maximum level this mod sets them to. This is unlike Raider Gang's Extended Edit or Raider Overhaul 1, which both allow raiders to level with the player indefinitely. It should also be noted that this mod reduces the health raiders have to start with, which compensates for them gaining 5 hit points every level up. Thus, in the end, you'll have a very difficult time telling the difference between this mod and vanilla. Leveled raiders is the plug-in equivalent of a placebo pill. Our final mod today is Gangs of Lexington, a lightweight raider Storyhaul. It's a very interesting project to flesh out the lore of the vanilla game's Northwestern Raider factions by splitting them into multiple gangs and adding some new lore notes and terminals. The Corvega factory is now occupied by the Rustback gang, which is locked into a war with the rival Roadkill gang that split off from them. The Roadkill control the rest of Lexington. The war is just for show though, because they're both still part of the same Raider faction internally, so they won't fight if you spawn them next to each other with console commands. The new lore is hardly an upgrade from the vanilla game, and this mod destroys some lore by removing the optional terminal entries that appear in Jared's terminal if you wipe out other raider locations before going to Corvega. The Scaver in Concord Speakeasy also has a note that mentions a Deathclaw attack in Concord even if you haven't fought the Deathclaw yet. It would be nice if these mistakes could be corrected. Compatibility-wise, this mod's terminals will conflict with Raider Children, but it's not a game-breaking conflict. You'll just lose lore entries from whichever mod loads first. This mod is an excellent idea, but it doesn't do very much as of right now. It's only a few notes, some dead bodies, and renamed raiders. I'd love to see this mod's scope expanded to cover the entire map. Maybe we'll see that in 2024. I certainly hope so. Okay, viewers, it's time to bring this video to a close. I hope you learned at least a little about these mods, so you can make a more informed decision about what to use. Most of the mods today were pretty good, but I'm sad none of them fulfilled my desire to see generic raiders entirely replaced with distinct gangs like we have in Nuka World. Well, I'm sure Bethesda has learned from their mistakes. I bet there's plenty of different space pirate groups in Starfield. Oh. Well, that sucks. Toodles, everybody.